The CWSA took a trip to the Owia water source so that our customers can have an appreciation of the changes that ensued following the eruption of the volcano, and that they would be aware of the continued efforts taken and still needed to ensure that the communities receive its water supply. Bernard Maloney, senior engineer, speaks to the effects of lahars on the main river and its effects on the CWSA infrastructure.
So we are on our way to the source at Owia, here located on the big river, which is behind me. Just to give you a bit of a background, the Owia system serves a population of approximately 960 persons, and that's obviously prior to the volcanic eruption, and it feeds the community of Owia southwards to Point. Now, the big river here has undergone significant erosion post-volcanic eruption, mainly due to increased river flows. The river now has a higher velocity and therefore a greater power to erode its bank. In my first visit here in June this year, the entire sides of the river valley, very close to the stream, that riparian zone, was completely devoid of vegetation. Prior to the volcanic eruptions, our pipeline passed to the right, to my right, on our way down, and then crossed the river at a convenient point not too far from here. However, after the volcanic eruption, all of that pipeline was completely washed away. Approximately 1,000 feet of 4-inch ductile iron pipeline was lost, as well as our intake infrastructure, which we'll see in a few moments. Based on the water quality concerns that we've been having, we've tried to be as proactive as possible, and we've installed a washout line here out of the intake. Now, prior to the volcanic eruption, the pipeline would have passed below here on very good soil and continued its way down to the village. However, we've now had to reroute the pipeline on higher ground on this side and sort of make a tie-in at this point where we could facilitate easy flushing to remove the sediments or any sediments that's in the water.
The CWSA is aware of concerns persons have with water quality, and Mr. Maloney demonstrates the high quality of water after sediments are settled. We must note that immediately following the eruption, water samples were sent to labs in the region and beyond for testing with positive results. Again, Mr. Maloney speaks to the issue.
So on our way up to the intake, I collected this sample of gravel material, which is essentially volcanic tephra, a mixture of ash and gravel that fell in this entire area. Now, if you take a look at the riverbed, you will see that very same material all along the river. But despite that, what we notice, and this is very characteristic of the big river, the water quality is pristine. There's absolutely no sediment in the water, and there's no mixing or dissolving of that sediment inside the water. So what I want to do is take this water and mix it with some of that ash particle that we collected and show you that if you leave the material for long enough, even though the material in your pipeline is highly turbid, if you leave it for long enough, it will settle and the water will be just as clear as this.
Superintendent Elvin Roberts now touches on how the old pipeline was affected and work that was done to restore water using PVC pipe and a new route for the pipelines. He also further demonstrates where the old infrastructure was located.
We are approximately 400 feet from the Owia Intake, the point at which we harvest the water to supply the villages of Owia and Point. What we are showing here is the previous pipeline. As you can see, it's a ductile iron 4-inch pipeline that run along the river on this side. That was before the Soufriere eruption and the subsequent lahars that would have totally wiped out this section of pipeline. In an effort to be able to restore the water supply to the villages of Owia Point, we took the decision to replace the entire pipeline from the source and tie back into the existing 4-inch lower down. And what we also did, we changed the entire alignment of the pipe, where we moved it to the other section of the river where it is not as vulnerable as it was before. We would have used PVC pipes, 4-inch PVC pipes, so that we could have restored the water in a much quicker time to the villages to help to alleviate the suffering that the villagers would have faced as a result of the no water situation. So where we are at the moment, we can see what was, which is the previous pipeline, and we can see what present is, which is the present pipeline that is now supplying the villages of Owia and Point.
In this clip, Mr. Roberts indicates the vulnerability of the system and measures put in place to initiate quick fixes in the future.
Okay, so we are now where the intake was before the Soufriere eruption. If you can see, just in front of me there is still the evidence of the rebars that we would have used to create the dam. However, as a result of the lahars, everything was wiped out. We also had, in this general vicinity, a still well, an entire concrete structure that was taken by the lahars as well. So the source at this point is completely transformed in relation to what it used to be before. As a result of this transformation, when we did our assessment, we realized that if we are to be able to adequately supply the villages of Owia Point, then we had to take the intake a further 200 feet inland. So we are going up to that new site now where the new intake is, so that we can have an appreciation of what was before and what is presently at the source in Owia. Okay, we are standing adjacent to the original dam, as we would say, and just ahead of us is the new intake that we would have put in place subsequent to the eruption of the Soufriere. Now, as you can see, this section of pipeline is still very much in the river path, which makes it very vulnerable should we have heavy downpour, should we have continued mud flows. We expect that this section would be damaged under those circumstances. So in an effort to minimize the downtime and the repairs that we'll have to effect, what we did, we installed a coupling on the line, which will essentially, if the line is supposed to be taken by the river, will dislodge itself from the coupling, as a result ensuring that none of the lengths downstream of this coupling will go with the river. We're anticipating that we'll only lose the lengths that are above the coupling, and hence the time that we can restore the water will be much quicker, because it will be far less lines we have to replace to get the water supply back up and running to the villages of Owia and Point.
Mr. Roberts now explains how the CWSA is managing the heavy siltation in the water supply that is currently occurring, especially when it rains, and will be experienced for some time in the future.
Okay, so where we are at the moment, this is the section that is directly above our new intake. As you can see from the footage, what we had here just a few weeks ago was a large sandbank, and the water is slowly eroding that sandbank, and it's taking all of that material down to our intake, and as a result, some of this material gets into the pipeline, and when it gets to the village of Owia Point, then it creates some problem for us in terms of block lines and also block meters. Now, this will naturally scour itself over a period of time. So what we are hoping to do in the interim is to install a device on the transmission mains to help to filter some of this sediment before it gets to the village. Secondly, we would have installed a washout on the 4-inch transmission mains lower down, closer to the village, where we can actually flush whatever material gets past the sedimentation tank that we are going to install. Whatever material gets past that point, then we'll flush it out at the 4-inch line closer to the village. All of this we are doing is really to ensure that the communities of Owia and Point, their water supply get back to normal as soon as possible. But as you'll appreciate, we are fighting against Mother Nature herself, and from time to time, we know how unpredictable the weather pattern can be, so we can still expect some disruptions from time to time, depending on the weather situation here in Owia.
Engineer Maloney talks about the volume of silt in the area and, among other things, asks the communities for their forbearance as the CWSA works alongside Mother Nature to serve its customers.
Yes, Superintendent Roberts just explained some of the issues, the operational issues that we're experiencing here at Owia. But just from a more scientific standpoint, I would have measured the thickness of volcanic material that was deposited following the eruption, and it averages between 4 to 6 inches in this area. Now the catchment area of this Owia intake is just over 1 kilometer square. Now if you do some quick calculations, I estimate that there's about 170,000 cubic meters of ash within this catchment area, and it's not unique to this catchment pond. Mind you, we are within a protected forest reserve, so there's no human activity here, just in order to maintain water quality. But further upstream, there will be similar settlements of volcanic material that will become remobilized whenever there's any increased river flow. Now, the drainage characteristics of this basin has changed considerably based on these deposits. Now there's little attenuation of the rainfall, there's not much percolation. So the rainfall runoff processes have changed, and the water comes from the rain straight into the stream with a greater erosive capacity to destroy our pipelines and our infrastructure. So we are asking the public for their forbearance at this time. We are aware of the issues, and we have a series of plans, as Superintendent Roberts has just highlighted, and we also have even long-term plans to handle the problems in this area. These long-term plans can't happen overnight. As some of you may be aware, pipelines last for upwards of 100 years. So whatever infrastructure we put in place here, we have to properly conceptualize, plan and execute so that it gives value in the long term. Now, as a young engineer coming through the CWSA, I have seen a lot of changes, and these are unprecedented times. We are seeing 1 in 100 year floods every other year. I mean, the volcanic eruption is just 1 in 74 years, according to the experts. However, climate change is an even greater threat. And according to the new IPCC report, we will expect 1.5 degree of warming in 2040. Initially, the projection was for 2100. So we have our problems, and we are aware of it. And at CWSA, we will be working our best. We have very competent staff who are very dedicated and have worked in this hazardous environment to provide you water of the highest quality.
We are here at Mrs. McCoy's residence in Owia, and what we are witnessing here presently is one of the meters that was cleared yesterday. We basically made a recheck, and what we have discovered is that although the meter was cleared yesterday and they had a supply of water, 24 hours after the fact, the meter is completely blocked again. This is a problem that will reoccur from time to time because we still have the sediment load is quite heavy coming down to the village at this point. The measures that we would have outlined before, what we have in place to mitigate against this, we are hoping that after implementation, then the sediment load coming to the village will be reduced to an acceptable norm, so that when we clear these meters, in that instance, the residents, they will have a constant supply of potable water. We are in the process, we're working in the area at the moment, we're just asking for your forbearance. We are very much aware of the issues. We know how frustrating it can be without potable water. We know that for the past 20, 30 years, this is something you have grown accustomed to. And so we don't want to continue to maintain that supply. But for now, because of what is happening up at the intake, we're having a bit of challenge, and as soon as we get it sorted out, Owia and Point will be back to their former glory in relation to 24-hour supply of potable water.
The team visited with Mr. Childs, a resident of Owia, who had nothing but high praises for the general manager, whom he raised certain concerns with and who moved swiftly to remedy those concerns.
About how he listened to me intensively, and what I said, and he's following up on what I told him, and he will continue, right? So I tell him, well, I mean, more time. It's difficult because I am 75 years of age. My wife is 76 years of age. I have arthritis. I can hardly walk. Good. And my wife, 76. She have a bad ankle. Good. And we both of us, how can we cannot go down to the river to get water because, I mean, our daughter hardly here. I mean, more times, you know, you young people being on your own, you go anywhere you want, I can't stop you, right? So I told him, I say, I am impressed about what you have done because you send the guys, when I went on the road, I see all the guys them walking, right? And I'm very happy, good, that we could get back some water, good. So I see I cannot go down to the river because a lot of people go down to the river, bathe, wash, and come up back. I cannot do that because I have arthritis on my two legs. Good, and at my age, at my wife's age, I cannot do it. See, so I mean, I'm glad, I'm happy. I went out in the village this morning. I just came back, and I see guys them over there walking and everywhere walking, right? And I'm happy. And listen, he says he heard about me saying about. I say yes, I'm happy. Mr. Sanders, I'm happy. No, because I could go. Last night I went in the shower and had a shower bath, which I never had for the longest while. Good? Yeah. And everything is getting along bit by bit. I won't say it's 100% yet, but it's getting along bit by bit. Good? Yeah. And I thank him very much. I thank him. Good? Yeah. Mr. Sanders, I thank you very much. This old man will still remember you. Okay? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Mr. Roberts took the opportunity to recognize the hard work put in by the staff in putting water back into the lines.
What we are seeing here is the finished product. The new pipeline installed to supply the villages of Owia and Point with potable water. What we did not see is what went on behind the scenes by our dedicated staff who really banded together to ensure that this came to fruition. We would like to thank the entire Georgetown staff who came together to make this a reality. We would also like to thank pipe fitter Maxwell Brown and engineer Jonathan Francis, who really spearheaded the installation of the pipelines. We also would like to thank our source operator for Owia, Mr. Lawson Lavier, who also partnered with our source operator for Fancy at that time, Mr. Chesline Ballantyne. It was a combined effort and dedication, and these guys really stuck it out and ensured that the task was complete. It was complete also to specification and also within the time frame that we set out to get it done. So I'd just like to use this opportunity to really say thank you to all those who are part of this installation to ensure that the system came back online as soon as it was practicable. We do hope that even as we continue to work together as a unit and as a team, that we'll continue to foster unity and togetherness, and we will come together to get the job done in such a way that will make lives more bearable for the communities north of the Rabuka Dry River.